Coming up on the Angus Report, how you can better communicate with consumers by incorporating science.
National Junior Angus Show is coming up. What do you need to know before you go?
Quality matters when it comes to barbecue. We share why.
And this week we celebrate 242 years of freedom. Happy 4th of July.
This is the Angus Report. Hello and welcome to the Angus Report. I'm Bob Cervera.
And I'm Clint Mefford.
Our top news this week. There's a lot of misinformation about animal agriculture out there, but you can't dispute science. Allison Van Enenum, a cooperative extension specialist at UC Davis, emphasizes the impact genetic improvement has had on the beef industry and how that translates to the consumer.
To me, genetics is like a free lunch. Once you've made that genetic improvement, it's passed on to the offspring and it continues to pay back year after year without any added input. And really, that story of how genetics is really the driver of productivity and consequently the environmental footprint of food production is a really important one to discuss with the consumer, because most consumers care about the environment and wouldn't support systems that were, had an increased footprint in the environment, yet often in their purchasing decisions they're kind of almost tricked into buying products that go against that very core value of trying to minimize their environmental footprint.
Van Enenum has a lot of experience communicating with consumers. Here's her advice for producers.
I think a really good message is what would happen if we didn't do genetic improvement. And so you can go back to the good old days of like the 1950s and kind of calculate, well, what would food production look like in terms of how many animals would we need to produce the same amount of product that we produced in last year using those old style genetics. And that kind of opportunity cost of how much reduction in animal numbers is a really important sustainability story. So if people are concerned around methane production and ruminants, here's a technology that's enabled us to produce more meat with less animals. Putting the story in a way that's comprehensible to them, like they don't want to know about EPDs, right? That's not going to be of interest. But if you can say, for example, a glass of milk today has 1/3 the carbon footprint that it did in the 1950s due to innovation and genetics, then they can kind of grasp that. So put it in a way that aligns with their values. And as I mentioned, their values are most likely to decrease our environmental footprint and to have safe food. And I think that we've been able to accomplish that simultaneously using breeding methods to get that objective.
Check out Van Enenum's Twitter account to connect with her.
So I am on Twitter, and I'm kind of old to be on Twitter. And at first I thought, well, what am I going to do with 150 characters? It's kind of stupid. And then I got on it, and I'm like, oh, I get it. Actually, this is really valuable. And I think it's valuable because it allows you to direct people to correct information and also to find like-minded people who are interested in science communication or communication around agriculture to try to actually have more discourse out there around objective facts as it relates to agriculture.
Move aside, millennials. Generation Z is here. Born between 1980 and 1996, millennials have drastically changed the world, especially in the way that we look at consumers. But there is a new generation that will change the food landscape. People born from 1997 and later are considered Generation Z. They account for 26% of the U.S. population. Soon, Gen Zs will take over buying control and will inevitably cause more changes in the food industry. The new generation is consuming more organic food and beverages. They prefer companies that are focused on corporate responsibility and smaller businesses that align with their beliefs. Millennials and Gen X already demand high quality from meat producers, but with Gen Z, the demand for increasingly high animal welfare standards will only grow.
You know your input costs, but what about revenue? Josh Maples, an assistant professor at Mississippi State University, has more.
We're really good at controlling our cost, and we know how much things cost, right, whenever we go buy inputs. But having an expected revenue is really important to figure out if you're profitable. We're in a business where we don't get to observe that revenue until the end of the production cycle. And there can be a long time lag in between the time you invest money into the animal and the time you actually get a return.
Maples was a speaker at Cattlemen's Boot Camp in Starkville, Mississippi. He explained Mississippi State's stockyard study to attendees. The study isn't published yet, but it looks at calf prices in sale barns across the Southeast over several years.
Really what I want to point out, especially about the stockyard study, is that that's a really unique data set. You know, we were able to get a lot of information about individual animals and about individual characteristics of animals that we don't often get whenever you're selling calves like that. And so that really allowed us to build a really good model, and it allowed us to kind of really see the effect of those individual characteristics when you're selling calves at stockyards. So I thought that was really helpful, and I think that's really helpful to Angus producers because, you know, a lot of Angus producers are still, the value is still in those calves whenever they sell their calves as feeder calves. So to be able to know here in Mississippi and in the Southeast the value of those characteristics, I think is very useful. We were able to put dollar values on some of the characteristics and some of the management practices that Angus Association and Extension Services recommend and suggest. So instead of just knowing that you know, improving my management practices are going to help me out, we were actually able to put a dollar value onto that.
Maple says the study can help you better understand your operations economics.
So using a study like this and knowing the economic value or the expected value of your animal can help you determine if those costs that you're putting into the animal are worth it.
Look for more agriculture economics resources on Mississippi State University's website.
We're in July now, and summer is in full swing, and so are the flies. Dr. W. Mark Hilton, a professor of beef production medicine at Purdue University, offers advice to control flies in your herd. He says flies adapt to their environment. It's unlikely producers can completely eliminate them, but they can control the impact flies have on their cattle. Hilton recommends to feed the cattle a larvicide or insect growth regulator 30 days before flies usually emerge. Another step to combat pesky flies is to introduce fly tags. He says it's typical to use 2 tags for older animals and 1 tag for calves. Hilton says a pour-on product could be used for both internal and external parasites, while dust bags or cattle rubs can help mitigate a fly problem with proper placement. Hilton's final recommendation for fly control is sprays. He says timely cattle spraying can be an effective measure in reducing the fly population. Hilton suggests you sit down with your local extension agent, beef specialist, or veterinarian to make a fly control plan for your herd.
The National Junior Angus Show will be here before you know it. What do you need to know before you go? The check-in deadline is Sunday, July 8th at 8:30 a.m. Cattle will be released at the show's end Friday, July 13th. Jacqueline Upperman, Events and Education Director at the association, encourages participants to meet people. Don't just sit at your show box. If it's your first year, pace yourself. Try to watch as many contests as you can. The next year, you can focus on what interests you. Finally, don't forget your registration papers, health papers, and copies of your entries. Bring your phone charger, a camera, plenty of clothes, and get ready for a fun week. And we'll see you there. We check in now on the latest cattle market news with our market update, brought to you by Cattle Facts.
Hello, I'm Patrick Linnell with the Cattle Facts Update. The pork industry is on pace for another year of record production as a result of a U.S. hog herd that has grown consistently since 2015, as well as expanded pork packing capacity. So far this year, hog slaughter has averaged 2.3 million head per week, nearly 3% larger than last year. Meanwhile, barrow and gilt carcass weights have averaged 212 pounds year to date, up 2 pounds from last year. Larger slaughter numbers combined with heavier weights has pork production up 3.7%. Pork production will continue to be record large as year-over-year increases in hog slaughter are expected to grow in the second half of the year. Despite larger production, strong exports have helped moderate the growth in per capita pork supplies at the retail level and provided support to the market. Year-to-date, pork exports are up 9%, with April exports at an impressive 18% higher. However, trade tensions between the United States and major trading partners have put a target on U.S. pork, which could pose a challenge for pork exports going forward. Mexico, the largest destination for pork exports, has already imposed tariffs on U.S. pork. Canada and China could also impose tariffs if trade relations with those countries don't improve. Using the CME Lean Hog Index, hog prices have been subdued by large production levels and the futures market is anticipating larger supplies down the road. Seasonally, hog prices tend to increase into the summer, but larger production and any disruption to exports may limit the extent of the seasonal rally. Pork production is expected to be at its peak into the fall and winter as weekly slaughter levels push to new highs. This will limit prices during this period and make exports especially important to maintaining per capita pork supplies at a manageable level. For the Angus Report and Cattle Facts, I'm Patrick Linnell.
To learn more about Cattle Facts, your leading source for beef industry market information, visit cattlefacts.com. When we return, we head south to Texas, where Joe and Jay Risky share the key ingredient to good barbecue.
Stay tuned. The Angus Report will be back after this.
Quality matters. Fourth-generation Texas barbecue brothers Joe and Jay Risky tell us why. Start with the best, end with the best. That's Joe Risky's easy answer.
Everybody asks, how'd you make that brisket so good? I say I started with the best cut of meat. So that's how it goes. Start with the best, end with the best.
The fourth-generation pitmaster knows a thing or two about creating customer satisfaction. Like cattlemen and women who raise beef, it takes an investment of emotion and time.
To cook meat tomorrow, we got a plan for it today. So we're constantly trying to stay ahead of it and be prepared for it. And like I said, I don't feed on Christmas. That's about the only difference, and I'm glad of that. But I cook on Christmas, so there you go. It's back to working.
That's what's required to meet the need of what Risky calls an off-the-charts barbecue trend he never saw coming.
I don't know much about the cattle industry, but I do know that the steps that they've taken to make a better genetic animal and the better marbling, which gets into the CAB, the upper two-thirds of it, is just what's taken the barbecue to the next level, is just the time and effort and knowledge that they've put into the cattle breed has come down to the barbecue guy making it. It's made a better product.
Joe's brother, Jay, says demand for superior product is here to stay.
Growing up in the restaurant business was a big help to me coming into the food service processing meat business. It helped me realize the value of quality, and I think we're seeing that trend across restaurants in general. They're instead of taking less quality product and trying to make a quality product out of it, they're starting with higher quality and finishing with higher quality.
In the last year, his company has purchased more than 1 million pounds of certified Angus beef brand brisket.
CAB has been a cornerstone in our quality movement, and it's grown year after year. The education they put into it makes it easy for the salespeople to sell it, and once the customers get it in their mouth, there's no going back.
Now go get some BBQ. Visit blackinkWithCAB.com and Angus.org for more information. And we'll be back with more Angus Report after this.
This week, we celebrate 242 years of independence in the United States of America. Americans will watch fireworks, reunite with their family, grill out, and head to baseball diamonds this 4th of July. And we could do that thanks to the brave men and women who fought and still fight for our freedom.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
When I think about 4th of July, it's mainly freedom. I have a sibling that's been in and out of the Army, and freedom is one thing that comes to mind. We're very, very lucky to get to do the things we do.
The pledge represents freedom to me. It's 31 amazing words, but the words at the very end are the most important, which is liberty and justice for all. So no matter who you are, no matter where you're from, you're guaranteed freedom in this country.
Without that independence, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing. We wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be able to do and live my dream. That's a very important thing for not just me, but all of America.
Freedom to me is the ability to make decisions, but still understanding that there's consequences for those decisions in the end. So we do have the freedom to do a lot, to say whatever we want, and I am grateful for being born in the United States, and I'm a big Christian, and so the ability to be able to follow Christ in any way, shape, or form whenever I want, I hold near and dear to my heart. But at the same time, there's laws that are made to keep us safe.
Freedom ultimately is doing something that we're not forced to do anything. This is a chosen lifestyle. Fortunately, I was given the opportunity as much as the freedom to do it.
Part of it is not just free to do, I guess, what you want to do, but what you need to do as a person each and every day. So.
What comes to mind of the 4th of July is ultimately grilling. We put ribeyes, burgers, whatever it may be on, and have family, friends, kids running around, maybe some sparklers, hopefully not burning themselves.
Our church has a big 4th of July celebration, and my husband and I are really involved in putting that on.
Usually around that time, we're either in the hayfield or we're working. Sometimes vacations and holidays aren't really vacations, but that's part of the business.
We don't take the whole day off. We never take a total day off in agriculture, but yeah, we take the day off the best we can, and mainly just spend with family and just watching the kids shoot fireworks.
We hope you have a great 4th of July and remember what it's all about. Up next, we head to the Y Plantation, founded by a signer of the Declaration of Independence. The Angus Report will be back after this.
The historic Y Plantation traces its roots to the 1600s and was founded by William Paca, a signer of the Declaration of Independence. Angus cattle were introduced to the farm in 1937.
Y Plantation started back in the 1600s, and back then they grew tobacco, corn, and livestock. I think they had Guernsey cows here. The farm remained in the family of William Paca from the 1600s up until 1937. William Paca was the governor of Maryland and a signer of the Declaration of Independence, is buried here on the farm. So in the course of 350, 400 years, this farm has had 2 owners and has had the same group of cows on it since 1937. This farm was bought in 1937 by a man named Arthur Houghton, who was the head of Corningware and Steuben Glass up in Corning, New York. He was looking for a piece of property and kind of have his own little colonial Williamsburg, so he restored the formal gardens, and then had all this land and then pursued in the cattle business. And he was very interested in factual numbers and said if they want to do something, they're going to do it right. And he hired a farm manager named Jim Lingle, and they decided they had bought 18 Angus females from about 5 miles from here and started breeding cattle for meat production. So he imported 2 bulls in dam from a farm not far from here, Jurymen of Wickwire and Puck of Wickwire. And the combination that seemed to work was the Puck on the Jurymen daughters. And then when he had done that for about 8 or 10 years, he needed some more bulls, so he went to England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales and imported 19 bulls that were used here. And then in 1959 closed the herd. So everything that we have today goes back to one of those original 18 females, and a majority on the paternal side goes back to Puck of Wickwire. Mr. Lingle, being from the dairy business, was fascinated by numbers, and what they wanted to try to do was put on the most pounds of beef in the least amount of time. But he went to a meeting in the early 50s put on by the University of Maryland and was introduced to a man named Dr. Willard Green. And they struck up a partnership where they would do these feeding trials down here, and the University of Maryland would be the independent third party to verify the results. And they built upon that test Every bull has been tested here since 1954, and as through selection and breeding decisions, their goal was 3 pounds a day. And when they started in 1954, I think around 50 to 52% of the bulls would gain 3 pounds a day. And then when they, in 1978, I think that number was up to about 92%. I think they were so much different than what was being produced in the United States in the baby beef era, and they were Scotch genetics, imported from England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. And because they never sold any females with papers, you couldn't buy a female and then start your own Y herd. They did all their sales private treaty. They never had an auction here. The biggest sale they had was Lodge of Y, sold him into syndication. They sold Lodge and 5 of his sons for $250,000 in the late 60s. In the 70s, they also syndicated Linebacker for $220,000. And I think in the 75, 76, 77 era, they were selling 100 bulls, and they would average $15,000 for these bulls, all sold private treaty. Well, Mr. Houghton was heading toward retirement, and he wanted to do something with the farm, but he didn't. They had done so much work with the University of Maryland that he decided he created the University of Maryland Foundation and gifted the herd and the extensive semen bank and some bulls to the university, and donated all the land to Aspen Institute, which is a nonprofit organization that puts on think tanks and seminars for different companies and organizations. I always tell people I have the greatest job in the world, and then was fortunate enough in 1986 to apply for the herd manager down here at Y and got that job, and was promoted to program manager in 1996. So Y cattle is all I've ever worked with my whole life. Y plantation matters to Maryland because we have to protect our resources. Within 200 miles of where we are, there's 9 million people, and those 9 million people have to eat. And we need to do it in the most efficient, economical way that we can.
I think it's amazing that the plantation founder actually signed the Declaration of Independence.
Well, I'm such a history buff, and that place really is a page out of a history book.
It is so cool. Visit Angus.org to view more episodes from I Am Angus. And that's all for this week's Angus Report.
We'll return next week at this time for more cattle news and highlights.
In the meantime, subscribe to Angus TV's YouTube channel to view more segments from the show.
Thanks for joining us.